Seisuru.
A very good evening and welcome. This is Primetime News on TV1. Today is the 22nd of August 2022. For the Newsfirst team, I am Jayama Ratnayaka. Let's start off tonight's bulletin with a look at your headlines.
Student activists detained under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. US and EU expressed displeasure over the use of the Prevention of Terrorism Act. More than 3,500 people arrested for 9th of May violence. Sajith Premadasa meets President Ranil Wickremesinghe. SLPP wants President to secure Gotabaya's safety upon his return. Kerosene prices spike. Minister shows relief for low-income earners.
In tonight's top story, Sri Lanka's Defence Minister President Ranil Wickremesinghe has granted approval to detain and interrogate the convener of the Inter-University Students' Federation, Wasantha Mudilige, activist Hashantha Jeewanthaguna and Venerable Galwawa Siridhammathera for a period of 90 days under the Prevention of Terrorism Act.
Approval was granted as per a request made by Sri Lanka Police, and police spokesperson SSP Attorney at Law Nihal Talduwa confirmed this to Newsfirst. The trio was among the 19 people who were arrested by Sri Lanka Police on Thursday evening, the 18th of August, following a protest in Colombo. 15 of the suspects were released on a personal bail by the Colombo Additional Magistrates Court. One suspect was remanded to the 26th of August by the court. Venerable Galwawa Siridhammathera, Hashantha Gunatilaka and Wasantha Mudilige were not released on bail and were instead held under a 72-hour detention order for questioning. Several councils visited the Terrorist Investigations Division in Colombo to inquire into the current status of the student activists.
Wasantha Mudilige ඇතුළු ඒ ශිෂ්‍ය ක්‍රියාකාරකයන් තිදෙනාව අත්අඩංගුවට ගත්.
Wasantha Mudilige and the other two activists were arrested on the 18th of August at 4 p.m. under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Police can only detain them for 72 hours. At 4 p.m. on the 21st of August, the 72-hour window closed. When we visited Wasantha Mudilige on Sunday morning, there was no detention order regarding all three of them. We have no clue regarding their whereabouts. Wasantha Mudilige was held at the Paliagoda police station. When we spoke to the OIC, he confirmed that there was no detention order. We were told the detention order will be with the TID and all of them will be handed over to the TID. We were told that the TID is the place for us to access information, and here we are at the TID. What we are told from the TID is that there is no detention order. An officer denied the presence of the three individuals at the TID. We are concerned if these are attempts being made to justify their reasons to detain them for 72 hours. We have serious concerns about their safety. They need to have access to counsel. Denying that is a violation of their basic rights. That is also a violation of the law.
The Inter-University Students' Federation visited the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka earlier today.
The Inter-University Students' Federation filed a complaint with the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka on Monday the 22nd, seeking assurance that the three activists who were detained will be protected. We have concerns over the security of the three activists. The reason is the conduct of the government to suppress the students' movement in Sri Lanka. Their rights have been violated. Under the normal law, a detainee must be produced in court. As their objective was not achieved, the government is using detention. The Inter-University Students Federation submitted a report to the Sri Lanka office of the United Nations on Monday the 22nd on the incidents of suppression that took place since the beginning of the Aragalla protests. In true Ranil fashion, the government is attempting to label the terrorist label to detain for 90 days. We will not be silenced. Continue to label members of the struggle like that. We will continue our movement to abolish this act. The Kalani University Students Federation launched a protest outside the university premises demanding the release of Vasantha Mudalige and other student protesters. The group emphasized that the attempt to detain student activists for 90 days without a court order is a conspiracy of its own and it must be defeated. They are persecuting him under the Prevention of Terrorism Act because he gave leadership to the Aragalla. They have been detained for questioning. It is the rulers of this country who were in power when the Easter Sunday attack happened, when the Ratu Pasula murders took place. So they are the real terrorists, not the Aragalla activists who took to the streets for their brethren. We will stand against Ranil Wickramasinghe's suppression. We will defeat Ranil Wickramasinghe's politics. Issuing a tweet, US Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Julie Chung, says, quote, using laws that don't conform with international human rights standards like the PTA erodes democracy in Sri Lanka, end quote. She also said that the United States encouraged the government to uphold the rights of the people to express their views.
Still in related news, the delegation of the European Union in Sri Lanka says that it is concerned about reports on the use of the Prevention of Terrorism Act in recent arrests. The EU in Sri Lanka says it refers to information given by the government of Sri Lanka to the international community about the de facto moratorium of the use of the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Meanwhile, Amnesty International South Asia Director Yamini Mishra has said using a draconian anti-terror law to crack down on protesters is a new law for the Sri Lankan government.
Issuing a statement, Amnesty International South Asia Director has said, quote, this weaponizing of an already highly criticized law, which should be repealed immediately, is a testament to how the authorities are unwilling to withstand any form of criticism and are systematically stifling dissenting voices. This is against Sri Lanka's international human rights obligations, especially the rights to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly, end quote. Yamini Mishra has also said, and I quote, charges of terrorism do not commensurate with any offences the protesters are alleged to have committed. Such an action by the authorities is excessive, disproportionate and in violation of international law. The PTA allows for detention of suspects for up to a year without charge, which is in violation of international law. The Defence Minister must not sign an order to detain them further under the PTA, end quote. According to the Amnesty International South Asia Director, the PTA has a long history of abuse in Sri Lanka, and this development shows precisely why both local and international actors have been calling for its repeal. Parliamentarian Dallas Aloha Peruma notes that a plan is in foot to suppress public dissent using the Prevention of Terrorism Act in the absence of a state of emergency. In a tweet, the MP said such attempts must be prevented at the very beginning. He warned that history has shown the consequences of not identifying such warning signs that are detrimental to the civil society.
The Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka has informed the Inspector General of Police that no suspect exercising their fundamental rights under the Constitution should be wrongfully treated as a terrorist.
It added that the IGP must be equipped with all the necessary and reasonable evidence that detained persons are responsible for any act of violence committed as terrorists under the PTA. It noted the offences enumerated in Section 2 of the PTA should be viewed as those committed by suspects who could be identified as terrorists. The Commission said it is deeply concerned about the resurrection of the PTA by the police on suspects who do not fall within the definition of the Act and informed informs IGP to inform the facts and circumstances under which these suspects have been dealt with under the PTA. The Human Rights Commission says it must be immediately informed of the sudden decision by the police to arrest and detain these suspects now under the PTA. The Human Rights Commission also stressed that if there is no such reasonable information to hold such suspects under the PTA, they must be produced before a judge immediately.
Meanwhile, the Sri Lanka Police says it continues to make arrests over the violence that ensued on the 9th of May 2022.
The office of the police spokesperson in a statement on Monday evening, the 22nd, said that daily arrests are being made over the violence that took place on the 9th of May 2022. Police said that 31 people were arrested on Sunday the 21st and 6 of them were remanded. According to the police, a total of 3,553 suspects have been arrested so far and 1,255 of them were remanded.
A civil society activist was arrested in Colombo today during a silent protest.
The national organizer of the Socialist Youth Union, Lanka Devapriya, alias Deva, was arrested by the Slave Island Police on Monday morning, the 22nd.
පොලිසියක් කියන්නේ රාජ්‍ය දේ බලන්නේ. ඇයි එන්න බැරි අපිට? පොලිසියගේ රාජ්‍ය ආයතන නැහැ. අපි මොකුත් ඩිස්ටර්බ් කරලා නැහැ කාටවත්. ගේට්ටු වහන්න කියලා. SYU එකේ අපේ දේවා සහෝදරයා මේ අවස්ථාවේ අත්අඩංගුවට ගන්නා පොලිසියෙන් කොම්පඤ්ඤ විදියේ පොලිසියෙන්.
The arrest was made when Deva attended a silent protest opposite the Slave Island Police Station on Monday morning, the 22nd. The protest was organized by the 100 for One movement against state repression, the Prevention of Terrorism Act and the state of emergency.
If Ranil
Wickremesinghe believes that he can govern through repression, he is wrong. This message is to the Pohottuwa politicians who steer him. This move is wrong. The people will rise in another way. The people will lead that movement with the clergy, including the Mahasangha.
ඒ සඳහා නායකත්වයක් දෙන්න මේ රටේ සබුද්ධික ජනතාව මහා සංඝරත්නයේ ආගමික නායකයින් සූදානම් වෙලා සිටිනවා කියන එක පැහැදිලිව කියන්න ඕන.
According to the police, the national organizer of the Socialist Student Union, Rangan Lakmal, who was arrested by the Slave Island Police, was handed over to the Fort Police. Police said that Rangan Lakmal was arrested as a suspect for his involvement in the incidents that took place in Fort, Bank of Ceylon Mawata and opposite police headquarters.
බොරු ප්‍රයත්න මේ හිඟන දේශපාලන ප්‍රතිපත්තියක් මේ තියෙන්නේ.
This is nothing but a blatant lie. Why is it illegal to arrest Rangana Devapriya? The Constitution of Sri Lanka has ensured the people's right to peaceful protest. Forget the Slave Island Police. The people can protest in peaceful nature opposite any government institution, opposite the presidential palace, opposite the Prime Minister's office or anywhere else. That is a right we have been given by the Constitution. Rangana Devapriya was arrested when he engaged in a peaceful protest. He was arrested at around 10 a.m. They have not yet obtained a statement from him. What happens then? They are going to delay this and obstruct the matter from being raised in open court. They are trying to benefit from that as well. He'll be taken to the magistrate's residence late in the night. The magistrate asks for him to be presented to the courts in the afternoon. They are not presenting him to open courts because of ulterior motives. The government might play their dirty games, but we will defeat them.
මේ අර්ථයෙන් තමයි මේ ඉදිරිපත් කරන්නේ නැත්තේ. ඒක නිසා අපි කියනවා ආණ්ඩුවේ ඔය මොන ප්‍රයත්නය දැක්වත් අපි ඒක පරාජය කරනවාමයි.
Aragalla activist Piyatni Keshala, who arrived at the Criminal Investigations Department to provide a statement this morning, was arrested and handed over to the Fort Police. Meanwhile, Aragalla activist Ravindu Dimalshika Rankot, Priyanga Vishwajit and Susara Yasas were summoned to the CID today to record statements.
තරුණ අරගලයට ජය වේවා. අපි කොයි වෙලාවකවත් ගිනි තියන්න පොළු අතට අරන් ගල් ගහන්න ගිය.
We never took up weapons to burn houses. Therefore, we will never give up. We are ready to face this. Similar to how they are summoning the peaceful protesters, those who incited violence must also be brought before the law. Those who dragged the people to the streets through corruption must also be summoned. Those who carried out murders every day are still roaming free. They must be summoned as well. We hope the officers of the Criminal Investigations Department have the backbone to summon influential political figures.
මේ අපරාධ පරීක්ෂණ දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව වල මේ නිලධාරීන්ට කොන්ද හැදෙන්න කියලා අපි ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරනවා.
කාර්යාලයට ඇතුළත් වීම සම්බන්ධව ෆොටෝස් බලලා ගොඩක් කට්ටිය
They arrested some people who entered the presidential office based on photo and video evidence. I have video and photo evidence of many people who attacked me. I don't see them being arrested. 6 people attacked me. I identified them in an identification parade. There are 4 more. A lot of our fellow Aragalla activists were attacked on the 9th of May. There is video evidence. They are not arrested. I think it is humorous that they are trying to arrest these activists for entering the office by showing pictures.
Kalum Amarasinghe, the Joint Secretary of the Aragalla National Movement, was arrested earlier today.
Joint Secretary of the Aragalla National Movement, Kalum Amarasinghe, was arrested on Monday the 22nd on charges of unlawfully entering the Sri Lanka Rupawahini Corporation. The police spokesperson said he was arrested upon surrendering to the Cinnamon Gardens police after he visited the premises to provide a statement. No official communication was made by police. I was engaged in a personal matter and the police had gone all over looking for me. I did not receive a warrant. I am here because I was told they were looking for me. I am a law-abiding citizen. I have not committed any wrong. We visited the SLRC based on their invitation. If one asks why we jumped over the wall, the answer is there was a large crowd at the gate. One person gave me a hand to climb over. Kalum Amarasinghe was produced to the Hulsdorf Magistrates Court and was released on a cash bail of 150,000 rupees and a personal bail of 300,000 rupees. Meanwhile, Jehan Apuhami, who appeared before court, was released on bail today. The suspect, who was produced to Colombo Fort Magistrate Tilina Gamage, was released on a personal bail of 500,000 rupees. The Slave Island Police had reported to the court that the suspect fled the scene after being arrested on suspicion of defying the police orders during the protest organized by the Inter-University Students' Federation recently.
8 people who were brought to court in connection with the attack on senior DIG Deshabandhu Tennukon were granted bail today.
Bail was granted after they pleaded guilty to the charges against them in court. Colombo Fort Magistrate Tilina Gamage ordered that they be released on 2 personal bails amounting to 500,000 each per suspect.
A letter of complaint was handed over to the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka from MTV Channel Private Limited this morning.
The letter pointed out that it is regrettable that intimidation tactics are being used by the administrative and executive arm of the state to harass the senior management of the Capital Maharaja Group in the aftermath of the recent brutal and inhumane assault on journalists of MTV Channel Private Limited. The letter notes that while MTV Channel Private Limited has made itself available before each of the forums that has sought its presence, from the police to the Honourable Human Rights Commission to the court system, it is evident that there are sinister moves afoot to discredit MTV Channel Private Limited and its media operations by once again targeting and harassing its senior management, directors and journalists. It added that there is a CID investigation launched targeting MTV Channel Private Limited, senior management and journalists, while those who assaulted journalists and the superior officers who were present at the location remain in positions of power despite HRCSL recommendations, including SSP Romesh Lienage and SSP Nizam Jamaldeen, who both function as important figures in the President's Security Division. This is a flagrant disregard of the HRCSL recommendations. The letter notes that in the present backdrop, if the truth comes to light along with evidence at the 51st session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva, it will appear deeply problematic for the current Sri Lankan government that is already facing the brunt of the aftermath of the brutal and inhumane assault on our journalists and all other ramifications of the protest movements in Sri Lanka. The letter adds that MTV plays an indispensably proactive and progressive role to ensure that any government gives due adherence to democratic norms and practices during the course of the governance of a country, and any undue and illegal intrusion on media freedom has always been condemned by our media. The letter calls on the Honourable Chairperson of the HRCSL, retired Supreme Court Justice Rohini Marasinghe, to intervene in preventing further harassment and suppression of freedom of speech and free media by directing the Inspector General of Police, among other things. A. To stop using the police and CID to arbitrarily, baselessly intimidate and suppress free media by misusing their authority under the guise of maintaining law and order. B. To not use MTV Channel Private Limited as a scapegoat by shifting attention away from the assault, especially given that the 51st regular session of the Geneva Human Rights Council is coming up. C. To expeditiously and fairly conclude investigations into the assault and to take legal action against the perpetrators. And D. To immediately suspend or transfer those police officers against whom there are accusations, pending investigations, fundamental rights violations, human rights actions for torture, brutality, especially against media persons, so that a fair trial can be carried out.
What was discussed at the meeting between the opposition leader and the president earlier today? More news on this follows after this short commercial break.
පුරා ගලන මේ සතුට සුරක්ෂිත කරන්නේ Eslon Inside. Eslon ජීවයයි ජලයේ ජීවිතේ.
Welcome back to what's in primetime news on TV1. Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa met with President Ranil Wickremesinghe for talks earlier today.
The Samagi Jana Balawegaya said the president and the opposition leader exchanged views on an all-party government. The SJB said that the president had once again requested the opposition leader to join with the government with ministerial positions awarded to SJB MPs. The opposition leader had turned down the offer and stressed to the president that the Samagi Jana Balawegaya will not obtain ministerial positions and will support an all-party government program. The opposition leader had noted that rather than adding more burden to the public coffers by obtaining ministerial positions, the Samagi Jana Balawegaya will remain in opposition and support the positive steps taken by the government and criticize the anti-people's programs proposed by the government.
The Sri Lanka Potujana Perumuna said that a request was made from the president to provide the necessary facilities and security to former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa upon his return to the country.
Last week we discussed the current status of the country and future programs with the president. We also requested that facilities be made available for former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to return to Sri Lanka. We requested adequate security for him as well. We were given a positive response and the former president will return soon.
හිටපු ජනාධිපතිවරයා නැවත ලංකාවට පැමිණෙනවා.
ඔබතුමන්ගේ විශ්වාසය වෙන්නේ එතුමන් නැවත දේශපාලනයට ක්‍රියාකාරී දේශපාලනයට පැමිණිය යුතුයි කියලාද එහෙම නැත්නම් එතුමන්ගේ වැඩ කටයුතු කරගෙන සිටිය යුතුයි කියලාද?
ඒක එතුමන් විසින් තීරණය කළ යුතු දෙයක්. එතුමා
It must be decided by him. When he was nominated for the presidency, he said he will remain independent. If he wishes to change his stance, he has the right to do so.
ඉදිරියට එතුමාගේ මතය වෙනස් වෙනවා නම් ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් එතුමාට ඒ සියලු අයිතිය තියෙනවා.
කැබිනට් එක දැන් දිවුරුම් දෙන්නේ කොහොමද මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ?
මෙහෙමයි. ඒ කාරණේ සම්බන්ධයෙන්
It is the president who is constitutionally empowered to make those decisions. However, as a party with the majority, we have made our requests.
වැඩිම බලයක් තියෙන ප්‍රධාන පක්ෂය හැටියට අපි අපේ ඉල්ලීම් ඉදිරිපත් කරලා තියෙනවා.
ඒ කියන්නේ වැඩි කෝට් එකක් ඕන කියන කතාවක් කියලා තියෙන්නේ නේ. අමාත්‍ය ධූරවල කෝට් එක.
අනිවාර්යෙන් අපිට ඒ අනුපාතය අනුව අපිට ලැබිය යුතු අමාත්‍ය ධූර සංඛ්‍යාව අපි ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
India handed over another shipment of fertilizer to Sri Lanka to boost the country's ailing agriculture sector.
The Indian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, Gopal Bagle, officially handed over 21,000 metric tons of fertilizer supplied under India's special support program to the people of Sri Lanka under the Indian line of credit. This follows 44,000 tons supplied last month under the Indian credit line, totaling about $4 billion in 2022.
This is for the people of Sri Lanka, for the farmers of Sri Lanka, India's support, India's help. As you know, so far this year, India has supported Sri Lanka with about $4 billion of support in its economic difficulties, which Sri Lanka is currently facing. We are always in support of the people of Sri Lanka. India will continue to be supportive of the people of Sri Lanka so that they can face the current difficulties. And today's event is an example of the benefits to both the countries, to the people of both the countries, from close friendship, from mutual trust and mutual goodwill between the two countries and their people.
The fertilizer will contribute to food security and support the farmers of Sri Lanka and demonstrates benefits to the people from close ties with India and mutual trust and goodwill between India and Sri Lanka.
Biz Fast.
Governor of the Central Bank Nandalal Veerasinghe says once Sri Lanka reaches a staff-level agreement with the IMF, the timeline is set to approach all external creditors.
So this is where we think, for example, now once we reach the staff-level agreement, then the timeline is that then we have to approach all our external creditors and start negotiating and discussing in good faith for us to obtain a relief on the discharge payments. So therefore that we need what they call financial assurance from our external creditors. We think next about 3-4 months. So hopefully, if all goes well, if all external creditors are cooperating with the Sri Lankan government debt management strategy, then hoping that we would be able to getting financial assurance somewhere in December, so that the IMF can submit our paper to the executive board so that they can start disbursing the extended fund facility towards end of this year. That is our timeline that we would like to basically implement. That all depends on how we got the support from the external creditors and how negotiation process going on. So this uncertainty is there. So hopefully that we all will be supporting us. Now, in fact, we have not officially approached the creditors yet. This way, as I mentioned, we are waiting until we come to agreement with the targets we have to reach and start to agreement with the IMF. Only after that we will be reaching out formally.
9 Sri Lankan apparel exporters successfully participated in the world's largest fashion marketplace, Sourcing at Magic in Las Vegas, United States.
9 Sri Lankan apparel exporting companies participated in Sourcing at Magic Las Vegas, which was held during the 7th to the 10th of August this year in the Convention Center of Las Vegas, USA, successfully capitalizing the numerous business opportunities created at the event to access the vast US as well as North and South American markets. This allowed them in securing direct orders worth over several million US dollars at the site itself, whilst establishing and consolidating a large number of business contacts with the US-based companies as well as companies based outside of USA, making an aggressive push to promote Sri Lanka as key apparel export destination. Magic Las Vegas is considered the world's largest fashion marketplace and the most comprehensive fashion marketplace in the US that takes place twice annually in Las Vegas, Nevada, showcasing women's and men's apparel, footwear, accessories and sourcing resources from around the world. It fuels the business of fashion by helping facilitate connections between buyers and brands with outstanding services like retail concierge and matchmaking programs, bridging relationships and strengthening connections.
The Indian Coast Guard has rescued 8 refugees from Sri Lanka who were stranded for 3 days in the middle of the sea near Dhanushkodi in Tamil Nadu.
8 Sri Lankan refugees, including 3 children and an infant who were stranded for 3 days in the middle of the sea near Tamil Nadu, were rescued by the Indian Coast Guard today. When personnel from the Indian Coast Guard spotted the refugees stranded in Arichalmunai, they intercepted and brought them to the shores in a hovercraft on Sunday. Sources said the refugees were brought to the Mandapam Marine Police Station.
An international team of researchers has found a new species of long-fingered bats in India and Sri Lanka, close on the heels of the discovery of a thick-thumbed bat species in Meghalaya.
The team led by Taraka Kusuminda of University of Ruhuna named the new species of long-fingered bats as Miniopterus phillipsi. It was named after W.W.A. Phillips in recognition of his contribution to studies on the mammals of Sri Lanka and South Asia. The specimens for these species were collected from Idulgashinna cave in Uva province in Sri Lanka and are now deposited in the Natural History Museum of the neighbouring country. The initial research was carried out in Sri Lanka in 2019 and it took 3 years to be completed in both Sri Lanka and India. Researchers found that the population of long-fingered bats in Robbers Cave in Mahabaleshwar in Western Ghats of India also belongs to this species, was earlier mistaken as Eastern bent-winged bats. The long-fingered bats belonging to the family of Miniopteridae are part of a large group comprising at least 40 species worldwide. They have similar morphology and overlapping dimensions, rendering species identification problematic.
The third phase of the Divi program, supported by LOLC Holdings in a bid to help the worst affected communities due to the economic crisis in the country, continued in the Kandy district today on its 17th day.
Under the Divi program, essential goods are being distributed to low-income families facing serious financial difficulties across Sri Lanka. Today's inaugural program began at the Harispattuwa Divisional Secretariat this morning, where essential food packs were distributed to 400 families in the area. Essential food packs are being distributed to poverty-stricken families and several areas of the Kandy district today.
Taking a look at another headline-making story. The woes of the suffering masses seem to have compounded following the decision to hike the price of kerosene by over 200%. The announcement was made last night when a price of a litre of kerosene was increased by 253 rupees. Accordingly, the selling price of a litre of kerosene currently stands at 340 rupees.
According to central bank reports, Sri Lanka's monthly kerosene requirement is around 19 metric tons. Kerosene produced as a byproduct at the Sapukaskanda oil refinery was released to the local market until recently. The demand for kerosene had risen by 5.1% by April this year in comparison to the same month in 2021, largely attributed to the hike in prices of gas and fuel. Fisherfolk are heavily dependent on kerosene to ply their trade, while estate communities and low-income earners in urban areas also consider kerosene a necessity.
We cannot travel many kilometers on a single litre similar to a car. We can only sail around 2 kilometers per litre. We need to travel at least 50 kilometers up and down to ply our trade. We need more than 30 litres. It will now cost us around 15,000 rupees per day. If we spend that money and are unable to secure a large catch, we will be helpless. God is watching over our suffering. They will have to answer to God. Can they settle our country's debt when we are treated this way? The farmers were thrown into jeopardy by depriving them of fertilizer. We worked with our bare hands and lived happily.
The daily wage of an estate worker at present is 1,000 rupees. Estate communities bemoan of their inability to purchase kerosene with a daily income of 1,000 rupees.
Our wage is 1,000 rupees. However, when ETF, EPF and other contributions are made, we only draw around 500 rupees daily. Since yesterday kerosene cost 340 rupees, we need only 1.5 litres per day. That cost us around 450 rupees. We have to survive with 50 rupees.
Low-income earners in urban areas are suffering a similar fate.
84 තිබිච්ච කාලේ අපි ගත්තේ ගොඩක් අමාරුවෙන් තමයි. දැන් 350 60ට ගිහිලා තියෙනවානේ. දැන් කොහොමද ජීවත් වෙන්නේ? දවසට රුපියල් 2500 අපිට ලාභය හම්බ වෙන්නේ. 350 දීලා ලාම් තෙල් ගත්තා නම් අනිත් බඩු මුට්ටු කොහොමද ගන්නෙ? මම තිරිවිල එලවන්නේ. දැන් දවසට
I am a truck driver. We cannot live when our expenditure is 3,000 to 4,000 a day, but our profit is a mere 1,500 rupees. If we purchase 3 litres of kerosene, it will cost more than 1,000 rupees. That means our daily earnings is spent on kerosene.
Taking to Twitter, the Minister of Power and Energy said, quote, kerosene price revision was a must for many years. One main reason for CPC losses was selling kerosene at subsidized prices, end quote. According to the minister, the latest price revisions brings kerosene on par with the costs the government incurs. However, his tweet further notes that a direct cash subsidy scheme to support low-income families, fishing and estate communities has been proposed by the government. Industry trade unions bear a contrasting stance. They claim the masses are made to suffer the consequences of corrupt deals.
Such an increase has never happened in our history. Was this adjusted based on global prices? No, the crude oil shipment that arrived was unloaded after 52 days and the crude oil was purchased at $130 per barrel, while the maximum price could have been at $100 per barrel. A premium of $24 was paid per barrel. Crude oil named Urol that produces 52% of furnace oil was moved from one vessel to another, brought to the refinery, hiked the price by 253 rupees and sold it to us at 340 rupees. 2 million families survive on kerosene. 99% of estate workers live on kerosene. We learned a lesson from the Rajpaksas. Resign with your corrupt posse and allow the people to make decisions.
While
the global price of kerosene stands at a lower rate, we are forced to purchase kerosene at high prices because of the dominance of one corporation. We received a consignment of crude oil named Siberian Light, which was of good quality. However, the latest shipment has more than 6% of sulfur concentrate. The furnace oil percentage of it is also high. The machines at the refinery are also facing certain issues because of this. We will face hindrances at the refinery if Urol crude oil is brought down in the future. It is pointless bringing down crude oil if it cannot be refined. Kerosene prices have been hiked exponentially. If we are to only focus on kerosene production, we will be unable to generate dollars. The stability must be maintained.
The Yuangwang 5, China's missile and satellite tracking vessel that berthed at Hambantota port, departed today. The Yuangwang 5 is one of China's latest generation survey vessels, and it officially entered the port of Hambantota last week for replenishment purposes. We leave you tonight with footage from the vessel departing the port. For the News First team, I'm Jayamar Ratnayaka. Take care and good night.